understand, even with all of the capabilities that Israel has and Israel advocacy groups have on U.S. soil in all around the Western world, they still were incapable of overcoming the sea of negative coverage due to their grand ambition being so violent. Their ambition here was genocide. And it turns out, even with the limited amount of information that you could get from social media from Palestinians directly, that was enough for people to go, this is horrifying. I don't fuck with this at all. I don't like this at all. We need to put a stop to this. That paired up with the incredible audacity, the arrogance, the sheer entitlement that you heard, that you saw with your own two fucking eyes, with your own two ears from every Israeli envoy, made this unavoidable, made this reality unavoidable. And here we are, holy Toledo. For the first time in American history, voters sympathize more with Palestinians than they do with Israelis, which is crazy. It kind of shows how fucking insanely twisted the American public is in general. This is a story that is both good and bad. It's good because in spite of the unlimited media propaganda apparatus that consistently contextualized every single thing that fucking Israel was doing as something that they had to do. You know, every dead child was contextualized in real time by an Israeli occupational force rear admiral or whatever, right? In spite of that, in spite of the faucet of misinformation, the faucet of propaganda, Americans still recognized the truth. Americans still slowly but surely saw the truth. So that's one thing. That's the good part about this. But the bad part about this, of course, is that it's still a +1 sympathy. It's still a +1 sympathy for Palestinians after 2 years of Palestinians experiencing genocide. That means there's still a long way to fucking go. Americans are some of the most propagandized people on the planet, straight up.
Yeah, this war caused a historic shift in public opinion on how Americans view the Middle East conflict. What are we talking about here? Who voters sympathize more with, the Israelis or the Palestinians? Back in October of 2023, it was the Israelis by 48 points. Look at this shift. Now we're talking about the Palestinians by a point. I looked back at every single poll that I could possibly find since this question was first asked in the 1980s. This is the first time ever in which the Palestinians had any sort of lead on this particular question. It is very clear that this war caused a historic shift away from the Israeli position in the middle.
Like even now, when Mr. Holy Toledo himself says this war, that's propaganda. He might not even be aware that he's engaging in propaganda, but that is propaganda. The United Nations has openly declared this to be a genocide. That means that this liberal news outlet is actually outflanking the United Nations in terms of doing pro-Israel propaganda, calling this, after the United Nations fucking called it a genocide, still calling it a war is propaganda. Now, sometimes Palestinians call it a war. Sometimes I even call it a war, right? But if you're not actually, if you have never at any point called this a genocide and you just have only called it a war, then it's propaganda. It's that simple, okay? And also, here are the results for that. I am going to give you a media confidence metric. This is directly what I talked about on that panel that I participated in the other day. In 2 years, since October 7, agenda-setting Sunday shows, CNN's State of the Union, NBC's Meet the Press, and ABC's This Week have not featured a single Palestinian guest. I wrote about how the U.S. media shuts out Palestinians while musing about the particulars of the genocide. And the only time they ever had someone who's ostensibly Palestinian was Jake Tapper having Ahmed Fouad al-Khatib on, and he works for the Atlantic Council. He works for the Atlantic Council, and he works literally as a part of the think tank apparatus of one of the two belligerents. America is a belligerent in this. Okay, America is a participant in this genocide. It is ridiculous. Does anyone have media confidence report that I saw the other day, like people's confidence diminishing in media since like nosediving since like the war in Iraq, the war on terror. Because I saw like trust in media is at an all-time low at 28% in the United States of America. Republicans' confidence in mass media report to news fully, accurately, and fairly now at 8%. Okay. And I want to show you this. Americans' trust in mass media from 1972 to 2025. There are a lot of complex reasons for this. Okay. There are some justifiable reasons for diminishing confidence in mainstream news, but there are also absolutely ridiculous reasons for why Americans have diminished confidence in mainstream news, like during COVID, for example. COVID was a major blow to media, and you can see it. You can see it happening in real time here. When you see a huge dip from 2019 all the way down to 2024. Part of that is the explosion of social media news, okay? The explosion of social media news. But overall, a big part of the reason why people that say a great deal, a fair amount, okay? The reason why that has dipped to 28% is, if you noticed, post 2001, there are some significant dips here. Okay, I've said this before, but I think the Iraq War and the illegal nature of the Iraq War and the justifications for the Iraq War from mainstream outlets shred their credibility in the eyes of a lot of Americans. Iraq War was a huge blow. People had a lot of questions post 9/11. Not a lot of those questions were left addressed. There was a lot of conspiracy theories floating around that created some instability for mainstream news and mainstream resources. But think about it. Like, we went from in 1999 at 55% to in 2000 to 51%, all the way down to now 28%. There were certainly good reasons in this process. I think like being skeptical of mainstream resources when they openly lie to the public, like with the Iraq War, that plays a role in this, right? That makes people lose confidence in mainstream resources. And I think, and this is something that I warned about quite a bit, the reason why this skyrocketed back in the first Trump administration was because they were very critical of Donald Trump, okay? They were unimaginably critical of Donald Trump. They kept heavily scrutinizing Donald Trump every fucking day. So they recovered from 32% all the way back up to 45% by 2018. But then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, that's when things took a nosedive turn. Obviously, a big part of the story is access to the internet and the internet access becoming way broader, access to the internet becoming a more significant aspect of news consumption. Because like I would say that even in this era from 2000 all the way to like 2013, 2014, you didn't actually have, you had the blogosphere, you had Air America, you had like some critical voices. Having said that, however, it wasn't like as, like people didn't actually get most of their news consumption from resources that were outside of mainstream and legacy publishers, right? I don't buy the Iraq angle on media distrust. Media in America knows Bush admin lied about Iraq, but they're not really aware of the media's role in selling it. I think that played a big role. I think that it's conspiracy theories and the Iraq war in general, like people's questions about 9/11 being left unaddressed, and also the media's advocacy, consistent advocacy for the Iraq war certainly played a role. I think that people, when they say we've been lied to, the Iraq war was a lie, we've been lied to about the war on terror, they also are talking about fucking mainstream resources, mainstream news, straight up. There is a reason why Jon Stewart blew the fuck up in this time period. I mean, I'm going to chalk this up to me being a fucking massive loser who was super invested in American news even back then. But I still recall Jon Stewart being one of the only fucking voices that was critical of both the Democrats and the Republicans, and also openly critical of the Iraq war and the war on terror. That was the peak of the Daily Show. So if a lot of people were tuning into Comedy Central and there were articles being written about like, why is a comedian the voice of change in news? Like, why is it up to a comedian to actually be the only trusted resource in mainstream news? Like, when all those articles were written, that means that people were not trusting mainstream media. But I think ultimately, a big part of the diminished confidence comes from COVID. During COVID, independent media exploded in popularity, and there were a lot of grifters who basically took advantage of the information vacuum that existed in this novel virus that was ripping people apart, just murdering people, that ended up killing more than 1 million Americans, right? And all the lockdowns and all the restrictions that frustrated a lot of Americans as well. Like independent resources, independent media basically blew the fuck up in that time frame, partially because we were locked in to our phones and to our computers. That's when, you know, in 2020, people like myself also blew up and became voices comparable to you know, mainstream resources. But basically, I think it's a combination of people refusing to listen to mainstream resources when they were trying to actively abide by and actively push for whatever the epidemiologists were saying at the time, and obviously that leaned on the side of caution, leaned on the side of restrictions, leaned on the side of like pushing for lockdowns and whatnot. And a lot of people wanted news resources to confirm their biases. So they sought out alternatives. And a lot of those alternatives were really fucking bad. So this is the part of the media confidence that I talk about when I say like the media was doing the appropriate thing. This is supposed to do. Mainstream media, mainstream resources were doing the appropriate thing and pushing for the best possible measures, no matter how fucking restrictive those measures were, right? In an effort to save people's lives. And that frustrated a lot of people. And that confidence took a nosedive again. And then I think the final blow came from the coverage of Gaza. The Gaza coverage played a massive role, I think, in this nosedive, because people saw so much death and destruction on their social media. They saw so many murdered children on their social media. And yet, when they tuned into like Jake Tapper, CNN, when they tuned into MSNBC, when they read headlines on the New York Times, they couldn't believe it. Like the juxtaposition of what they saw on social media directly being reported by Palestinians versus what they were hearing from mainstream resources, I think deeply heightened this fissure. And for people saying like Yasha Levine was talking about saying it would be interesting if MAGA abandons Israel before liberals do law, but this is wrong. Liberals have already abandoned support for Israel. Support for Israel's military action in Gaza by party identification shows all the way back in July, Democrats at 8%. 8% of Democrats approve Israel's military action in Gaza. 8%. Okay, Israel's trying to hold on to the 71%. Like it's their lifeline. But Democrats have already fucking gone, and so have the independents, really. This is why I say it's fuck Israel o'clock. It's been fuck Israel o'clock. And the more the media actually frames it in a truthful manner, the more other people will also get on board with fuck Israel o'clock. And that will still continue to heighten the contradictions. And it will probably embed deep mistrust in mainstream resources if they don't fucking follow through on the way people are feeling about this and cover this crisis in the moral clarity that it fucking deserves.
Middle East conflict and towards the Palestinians when it comes to who Americans and voters sympathize with. This, of course, was led by Democrats, because what are we talking about? We went from Democrats favoring the Israelis by 26 points to the Palestinians by 46 points. That is a shift, John, quick math in my head, of over 70 percentage points. But overall, the first time ever in which more Americans sympathize with the Palestinians over the Israelis. Truly a historic shift.
It's a big shift overall, a big shift within the Democratic Party. What about Republicans?
Yeah, it's not just Democrats, though, in which we have seen a real shift of opinion. Even within the Republican ranks, this war has caused real division. What are we talking about? Well, we often talk about by age within the Democratic Party, but what about...
I swear you're paid by the RNC the way you disproportionately attack liberals in America. At least I hope you're getting paid because you're just a useful idiot. If not, you took all the good streams, says. My friend, I call balls and strikes. This week is probably the worst time that you could say this about someone like myself, because I've even glazed Hakeem Jeffries, which is something that I never thought I would ever say. So you're absolutely wrong. When the Democrats actually do right by their constituents, like, for example, pushing for a shutdown and really centering the conversation around the Republicans taking away people's subsidies for healthcare, I'm on board. I'm invested. I'm honest. If you see me criticizing the Democrats, let me remind you, it's probably because they're doing something worthy of criticism.